Good afternoon. My name is Mike Darcy. I am the CEO of Africa Mobile Networks, AMN, and I am delighted to have been asked to give you a short presentation on AMN, who we are and what we do. I hope that it's possible for you to see my screen as I will be working through a small deck of slides. Just briefly, first of all, about AMN. AMN is a kind of TowerCo, but we have some differences to what we would call a conventional TowerCo. We do build towers to deliver mobile network service. We do it in Africa. The big difference is to the what we call the conventional model would be that, first of all, we're full turnkey. And by that, I mean that we do active as well as passive. And we do the whole process from start to finish, from site surveys to providing the capital, building, operating, maintaining the sites. The second important difference would be the commercial models, where we have built our business mostly on the back of a revenue share basis, where we are effectively taking the operator risk away from the operator. So AMN, we were formed 2013. We are a UK registered group of companies headquartered near London. We have currently, and it's increasing all the time, but currently 11 subsidiary companies, all of which are 100% owned. 10 of those are operating companies, providing service and generating revenue in 10 different countries in Africa. And then we also have a technology company as a result of a strategic acquisition we have made this year. Our first base station went live in January 2014, and we are currently around 1,500, 1,600 base stations that we own and operate, and we will be close to 2,000 by the end of this year. Today, we've put $56 million into the business, and we're just in the final stages of closing a big new private equity investment, which is $40 million, which will happen before the end of this year, to fund the continued expansion of the business. We are EBITDA positive. That was a milestone that we achieved in March 2020 and each month since then. In terms of what we do, I already explained some of it. We call it network as a service. So we are not selling any hardware. We are not selling any software. There's no transfer of title to any assets at any time. It's a pure service business. We find locations to build sites, we fund, we build, we own, we operate. And we deliver a service to mobile network operators, tier 1 mobile network operators in Africa. Turnkey means everything, so passive infrastructure, tower and power, also active RAN equipment, backhaul, I mentioned already, full operations and maintenance. Our solutions are ubiquitous. We don't have any restriction. We can build a base station anywhere, no constraints due to power or line of sight or backhaul connection. We did focus initially, we built the business on a revenue share model so far, but we have, the request of the operators mostly, added OPEX model, where instead of where AMN chooses to build a site, we will now build sites wherever an operator will ask us to, providing that they take the operator risk. So that would be more conventional TowerCo model, I think. Our footprint is shown on this slide. I mentioned already 10 countries. We added, I think, 3 in 2020, which of course has been a challenging year for everyone, but we have added 3 new countries and we plan to add 4 more next year. Our goal is to turn everything on that map, which is south of the Sahara, that same green color over the next few years. We have now standardized on 2 different types of tower. Our focus is rural. I'm not sure if I mentioned that already, but making or delivering sustainable solutions in a rural environment is challenging. Sustainability means an acceptable R over I, so our entire focus is on maximizing the R part of that formula and minimizing the I. We have these 2 standard solutions, the one on the left, which is 12 meters, and that's to the top of the antenna, which we build those in a day. It's a high volume, low cost business. We build base stations for less than $10,000 each, all inclusive including site acquisition, which is our biggest cost, everything. And then we also have, for larger villages, our 20-meter solution. It supports 3-sector antennas. The main difference between the two towers, really, apart from just a few meters in height, is the ability to carry equipment. So the one on the right can carry much more equipment to serve much greater capacity than the one on the left. Both ubiquitous, they can be VSAT or microwave, but we can deliver a connection to anywhere that is needed, and both of them come with those two commercial models that I mentioned already. I mentioned a strategic acquisition. We have acquired a company headquartered in California in the US, Silicon Valley, which is a software tech company. We have done this in order to bring in-house our radio access network technology equipment, something that we have to date purchased from third-party vendors for 2G equipment, 3G equipment, 4G equipment, but now we have that in-house. The company that we chose not only brings the technology in-house, but also we selected on the basis of some very innovative technology that they have to be able to do multiple carriers and mixed radio access technology, so 2G, 3G, 4G within a single box. So we're working hard to integrate this now into our solutions, and the first AMN sites that get rolled out with this new technology will be in the first half of 2021. And now with this new technology, we will be delivering multiple TRX on 2G and also 3G built in from day one, with LTE coming soon, probably as an option that we will add at high traffic sites. I mentioned microwave and VSAT. So most of our sites are VSAT. Our sites are remote sites. They're a long, long way away from any existing tower. VSAT gives us ubiquity, meaning the ability to build a site absolutely anywhere without restriction. It's also a very reliable backhaul technology. But we also have added recently, mostly at the request of operators, an option for a microwave. So where an AMN site is within 25, 30 kilometers or so of an existing 60-meter tower, we can connect the site that way as well. Just briefly on network management, I think the point here is that just building a site is only the beginning of the story. Once a site has been built, it must be maintained and operated, and good availability achieved in locations which are very, very remote. So we have a strong in-house software engineering capability. We have developed bespoke tools to allow us to monitor the network in real time, not just to be able to see whether or not sites are up or down, but be able to monitor many different parameters from the site, like battery voltage, temperature, transmission link performance, as well as GSM performance as well, and critically giving us alarms. So not just when a site's gone down, but telling us of anything which maybe needs attention. And through this, we are able to deliver good availability to our customers. I wanted to mention a little bit on retail support. Just as before, building a site is just the beginning. Not only do you have to then operate and maintain it and deliver a high availability service, but our business has been built on revenue share, and it means that we do care how much that tower is used, and our income is based on that. So, and of course, because our sites are in such remote locations, there is often no existing infrastructure in terms of retail distribution channel, and people can only use, so it's great to have the service, but it can only be used if you have a phone, if you have a SIM, and if you can buy airtime. So we have, in some cases, we have contractual obligation to do this, but even where we don't, it's very much in our interest to take control of the retail distribution to make sure that people have got phones and SIMs and that they can afford them. So AMN does deliver subsidized, AMN's cost subsidized low-end feature phones to get users on the network, because we know that once users get on the network, even in the poorest village, they will buy airtime, 10 cents here, 20 cents, and over the course of a month, a couple of dollars. And that's the basis of our business and our commercial sustainability in some of these remote sites. So I don't know if you guys get a copy of the presentation. I hope so, because on this chart I have included some links to some videos that we have posted. Much better than I can explain in front of a PowerPoint presentation. You can watch these videos. They are maybe 2 minutes each, and you can see how transformational in a village which was previously unconnected, the service that AMN delivers. Not just voice and internet access, but also the applications that come with that. So very much mobile money. Technology that we provide is a big enabler for and a big change to the lives of the people in the village. What I'm going to try and do now is to stop sharing my screen. And I don't know if that has worked and if you can see me. But I just wanted to, I have a couple of props with me that I thought might be slightly more interesting than the PowerPoint. So next to me, we have a mock-up. Well, it's not a mock-up. This is a real working version of AMN's new radio access equipment. So we have a box here which has got the radio node, which has in this single box the ability to deliver both 2G and 3G in the initial deployment, but also 4G, all from the same box on any of those 2 towers that I showed you, including the small low-cost tower. It's very much based on Open RAN principles, I would say, in that it is all developed around a general purpose computing platform. In fact, I have an example for you. So this is, it's essentially an Intel NUC. This is not an Intel NUC, but it is based on an Intel processor, high-end processor. So all of the functionality to deliver the radio network is in software. And we then marry that with very simple radio cards. This is one which is an AMN designed card, which is not specific to any radio access technology, so not 2G or 3G or 4G. There's no technology specific ASICs or FPGAs in here. This will upconvert any baseband signal to any frequency up to a 6 gigahertz carrier. So it's technology independent and it is frequency band independent. And then we marry those together with integrated power amplifiers and low noise amplifiers, which are band specific and need to be in order to deliver good noise figure for maximum receiver sensitivity and also maximum power efficiency on the transmit. And for us, in the environment in which we offer, where diesel is not allowed and everything is on solar, power consumption is a big driver for us, and we are ruthless about the power efficiency of our sites as a result. So with this, we deliver multiple services, the 2G, 3G, 4G, as I said, with good expansion capability. And we are looking forward to the first AMN sites based on this technology to be rolled out first half of next year. So that actually concludes my presentation, which might be slightly ahead of schedule, Matt.
But no, a fantastic presentation. I'd like to invite the other panelists to come join us. There was a question just while we're getting into it, before everyone logs in, turns their camera on, around your position on RAN sharing. I presume you're very much in favour of it.
Yes, anything which increases the efficiency, of course, is a good thing, helps with the commercial viability of a site. So yes, passive sharing, but also very much so active equipment sharing is something that we believe is a good thing and support very much.
I'm going to hand over to Sally now, who will be moderating this panel discussion and sort of response to some of the work you're going on. And towards the end of the panel, I'll be passing on some questions from the audience to Sally. So please do pop them in the box on the platform, and I'll feed them through to Sally to pose to the panelists later.
Super. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Mike. I think that was a great presentation to kick us off into this discussion. Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel. My name is Sally Overall. I'm an independent consultant. Obviously, on this panel, we are focusing on, how we can extend rural coverage, the technologies that are associated with that, and also how we reach some good commercial models across all the spectrums. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel, which is Michael Darcy, who you all know from his props and his presentation, and Emmanuel Leonard from Helios, and Gary from Huawei. If you could each just give you a brief intro, maybe starting with Emmanuel, and then we'll kick into the questions. And please feel free to send any questions to Matthew as we go through the discussions.
Thank you, Sally. I'm Emmanuel Leonard. I'm the Business Development Director for Helios Towers Group, based in the Dubai office, and I focus primarily on M&A and the company's expansion to new markets. But we are also exploring new business model and other avenues for the company to expand and increase the top line. So I'm very much following and monitoring what's happening in the rural landscape, including what AMN is doing.
Mm-hmm. Gary?
Hi, I'm Gary Yu from Huawei. I station in Shenzhen headquarters. So my prime responsible is to help operators and also tower companies to build their sites and to make sure they are successful no matter where they are.
And Michael, just for the benefit of those that may have joined a bit late.
Okay, so sorry for those that heard it already, but my name is Mike Darcy. I'm the CEO of AMN, and AMN builds sites in rural villages in Africa.
Super. So I think the first question that always comes to mind is that we all have a different view of what a rural site is. And for the purposes of this discussion, I think it would be interesting, starting with you, Michael, if you could explain to us sort of a rural ultra and then an ultra rural, whether you want to go on population or revenue or traffic, whichever sort of definition works for you, and how the MNOs have got to those definitions. And then we can ask you a few additional questions. I'm sure Emmanuel will have some, and Gary, on how we get to those definitions and whether they're on off-grid particularly.
Yeah, so we have our own definition of what is rural, and we do use those terms that you mentioned. So starting at the smallest, we would use ultra rural to describe the smallest communities that we are able to serve. So starting from 500 people and below up to 2,000 or 3,000 people, that would be AMN's definition of what is ultra rural. And then what we might call ultra rural might be from 3,000 people up to several thousand people, and anything up to 10 or 12,000, which compared to a city of millions of people, a town of 10 to 12,000 people, we would still call that rural, but make a distinction between a 12,000 population town or village and a 500 site village, which is our ultra rural. Those are roughly, they're not really strict, but those are roughly the guidelines that we would use.
And I know you mentioned that you are obviously invested in solar and renewable, but are some of your sites on and off, or when you grid or off grid?
Not deliberately, no. So every site is on 24/7. Okay. So I think that and we only use solar. So diesel is absolutely not allowed. 100% solar. Solar is a great technology, of course, for Africa. So our sites are designed to have between 2 and 3 days of I forgot all the phrases that we use, but there's enough battery capacity to run the site for autonomy. So enough battery capacity to run the site for 2 or 3 days. And I think that over the years, given that we are measuring parameters from our solar systems on every single one of thousands of sites every 1 minute across all of Africa, we have a huge amount of data. And so we are able to provision and design the sites in terms of the solar input power needed and the battery capacity needed to deliver 99.5, 99.7% availability all year round, through rainy season, through dry season.
Okay, that's, I mean, just going to you, Emmanuel. Obviously, your model on what you would classify as one of your rural sites is a little bit different to the ultra and the ultra, and some of yours are potentially on and off grid, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I will start maybe to give a very brief overview of what we do and how different it is from the segment that AMN is targeting. So Helios Towers, is a tower company operating across six markets on the continent, and the vast majority of our business is constituted by macro towers as well as rooftops. These are large towers which can accommodate active equipment from multiple mobile network operators. And the business model of towercos in sub-Saharan Africa is based on providing both the power and the space to the customers. The reason why the towercos like us have been so successful in this environment is linked to the high potential of achieving synergies on a macro site, primarily due to the high cost of providing power. Sally, as you mentioned, there is a large portion of our portfolio which is off-grid. However, a site being off-grid is not, in itself enough to define it as, I think, as a rural site. The way we're looking to discuss it today, and coming from the macro tower angle, I would say the kind of area of overlap with the definition that Mike just gave at the beginning is this notion that these are areas where the standard macro solution, where only the passive side of the assets being mutualized is typically not competitive enough for a mobile network operator to be profitable, or if one is profitable, maybe it wouldn't be a deep market enough for two operators to be available, in the area and both be break even, and that's a problem for a macro tower provider, because our business is really based on the synergies of having at least two mobile operators on a site. And I would say that's the starting point from our point of view to start looking at new solutions, whether it's what AMN is providing or other potential network as a service, or other ways of tackling the issue of MNO profitability.
Yeah, that fits more into your model structures. Yeah. Gary, I know previously when we discussed, I think it would be a good time for you to come in here, to sort of say what pain points you and your teams have experienced on the rural sites, particularly, other than the obvious.
Yeah. Actually, we are quite on the same page. For the definition, first of all, I briefly introduce the definition. We also have the same page to define the rural as from rural, ultra-rural, and ultra-rural, based on the population from 3,000 down to the below 500 populations. So based on that, we have different kinds of solutions. Some of them are for the ultra-rural. We also are pure off-grid solutions. But the challenges we have is we find out that the DNA for the rural solution to be successful in Africa will be based on three key things. So the first one would be on the solution need to be multi-scenario based, because we think based on the environment in Africa, we think one solution is quite difficult to balance between the cost and the coverage for the citizen. So based on that, we think different villages in even within the same country, they will need different solutions. So that's why we need to have some kind of flexible solutions. For example, in three aspects mainly. First of all is the rent, second is the transmission, and the third one would be on the energy side. So for the access part, we believe based on the village scenario, maybe let's say some villages, maybe the population are more evenly scattered. So for that, maybe we can provide some solution to use the OMI antenna to cover the whole region. Whereas in some places in Africa, we find out because of the geographic and population distribution, maybe we can have a cheaper solution if we can minimize based on the multi-sector solution instead. So instead, let's say instead of traditional 3 sectors, maybe we can have a more flexible to choose 1 or 2 sectors, etc. So to minimize the cost. And in some cases, maybe if we need to slightly extend the coverage, maybe we need some antenna gain, solutions. So that can help us to use the same site to extend the coverage a little bit rather than to build another site nearby. So based on this kind of flexibility, I think we can to come with a matrix to provide a more reach and options for the operators and tower companies.
Yeah, sort of not one solution fits all, and it does vary from sort of east to west, north to south, as to what.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And for the second part is the transmission. Apart from the microwave and also the VSAT, we also have a solution to provide the relay, so which is based on the current operators sub-6 GHz spectrum. So they can also use that one to provide more options based on different coverage environments. And for the energy side, we have, of course, the grid and off-grid solution. So, of course, luckily in Africa, we see some of the sites, they still have grid. So in that case, we can provide some hybrid solution, which can help to minimize the balance between the electricity grid, maybe some other DG, or even some battery, based on mixture of this kind of solution. We try to provide our best value curve so that our customer can have the lowest cost on energy. And of course, most of the region in Africa maybe will be based on the off-grid. So for that, we also the industry can also provide lots of solar hybrid solution as well. So that's the first thing, lots of scenario. The second thing is the smooth evolution, because we see many in the places in Africa, maybe they can start from 2G or 3G, but maybe down the road, maybe all in a sudden, we can see there will be a need for demand for the upgrade. Some of them are expected upgrade based on the rural traffic demand growth, and some could be unexpected. Take an example would be like in Thailand during the recent lockdown period. We find in Thailand, lots of the people work in the city. They move away from the city and go back to their rural family. Yeah, so that could all of a sudden they come up with a huge demand of data demand in the rural market. So that's why the country, the government also want to push up for the upgrade for more high-speed data. So I think from the telco perspective or operator perspective, it would be good to have a solution that can ensure smooth evolution whenever they need. And the final one will be on the smart management, because we know the rural market is really remote in some cases. So, so we try to minimize the OMN cost and minimize the number of visits. So take, for example, for solar panel, right? We use on solar panel. So maybe we can also have a solution to have a detector so that whenever there's no matter the operator or the telco company can remotely detect based on a single platform to analyze whether that solar panel, in case if they have problem, even it's just covered by dust or it need to be replaced. So I think that kind of analysis, that kind of AI, we can also help to minimize the cost.
The cost, yeah. I mean, I think this is a good time to maybe move on to sort of the costs and how you make it work, whether you are sort of, Mark, whether you're using your revenue model or manual, sort of how you guys would look at approaching it, because I think how to commercialize these opportunities is going to be what a lot of people are interested in. Mark, maybe you want to just explain a little bit more, sort of some of your different models that you alluded to in your presentation. And then Emmanuel, if you wouldn't mind following on with sort of a bit of, you obviously following on from that with some of your questions and or how you envisage going forward on looking at these sites, knowing that the MNOs and yourselves are going to come under more pressure, from the regulators due to COVID and coverage issues to sort of get that connectivity to the more rural areas. Mark, can we start with you?
Yeah, so our business, we started with revenue share, and revenue share remains the majority of the sites that we operate today, although it's moving more towards 50-50. In the very beginning, one of the things that we recognized, I believe, is that there were so many villages in Africa of even 5,000-7,000 people or more that were not connected, unless it happened to be fortuitously within 10 kilometers of a tower serving a bigger town and it got accidental coverage. And we realized that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these villages across all of Africa which are not connected. And the reason they're not connected is because there have been many attempts at rural projects, but most of them have ended in failure, and they fail because of economic sustainability. And of course, it's not so clever to realize that in order to make something economically viable, it must deliver an ROI that is positive. And it's a fairly simple formula. You have to make the R as big as possible, and you have to make the I as small as possible. And that's where we thought that we could make a difference. And we designed our business around low cost, high volume solutions. The traditional telco tower market, as we've seen it, not just in Africa, has been very much large, expensive, bespoke towers, which works really well in some environments. But there's a reason why there are so many unconnected villages. So in order to make the numbers work, we said it has to be high volume, it has to be low cost. One of the other challenges that we faced, quite frankly, in the beginning is how do we get the attention of the operators? Because it's very difficult and notoriously difficult to sign a contract with a mobile network operator. And you've got giants such as Helios and the other telcos. You've got the OEMs such as Ericsson and even more powerful nowadays, Huawei. So how do we get the attention of the operators against such formidable opposition and sign contracts? And so the revenue share, frankly, was a way to offer something different. So we said, listen, not only do you have no capex to invest, but you don't need to take any OPEX risk. We will do that. So through revenue share, whatever it generates, you just give us a share of that revenue. And very much we found that the operators like that proposition, mostly because we do everything, it's full turnkey. So from start to finish, we do everything. We say, you just sit back and let us deliver traffic and revenue into your network, and you don't take any OPEX risk either, just give us a share of whatever we deliver to you. And that's how it started. It's so far worked quite well for us. But with the revenue share model, we choose where the sites are going to be. It must meet our criteria. We must believe, given that we're taking the operator risk, we must believe that we can make money. So it must meet certain criteria. What we found is that increasingly, the operators would come to us and say, well, we love that, but will you now build in these locations?
But yes.
And we would say, well, mostly they don't meet our criteria. But hey, listen, if you take the operator risk, we'll build a tower wherever you want, right? So that's where OPEX model came from. So the scope of the services that we deliver, the full turnkey scope of services is exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the invoice, where the invoice is, instead of being a share of the revenue and the traffic that passed through the tower, it's a fixed fee, which would be a more conventional telco approach commercially, I think. I'm not quite sure if I've answered the question, but that's how we do it.
No, absolutely. Emmanuel, if you would want to just comment on sort of how that would or wouldn't work for you and what what you are working on.
Yeah, maybe to elaborate on what Mike was calling the conventional telco approach. I mean, what we do is convert capex into OPEX. And I think the model that the AMN is providing is actually providing this to the MNOs. We also look to decrease costs everywhere possible, both capex and opex, in order to provide a competitive product. And we recognize that in the rural space, it's probably the area where there is the most potential to even further lower the cost of operating. Even though these are expensive areas to operate, right? You mentioned during your presentation, site acquisition is your biggest cost. Logistics is complicated, and power is definitely an issue. All these things are issues that we all face across our markets, whether we're a traditional towerco or an AMN type of towerco. However, there are certain red lines that we want to avoid, crossing, and some of this includes, starting to get too involved in the distribution. I think, Mike, you mentioned how you're supporting the distribution, the site selection, and the fact that you're effectively taking the MNO's risk in a lot of cases, except where they agree to provide a fixed fee in exchange for the MNO, your customer, taking that risk. And for us, we find it quite challenging because the business model of traditional towercos is based on a secured annuity cash flow based business, which doesn't very much like variability in terms of the revenue and the profitability. So we like visibility. Our investors and lenders like to see that visibility. There is another aspect I think worth highlighting is the question around the terminal value, because when you look at the valuation of towercos, this value overall has been going up over time, driven by decreasing yields across all the asset classes. And I'm not talking just about Africa, but if you look at the number of listed US towercos or in Europe with Cellnex, and a lot of that is based on the notion that the cash flows that we are delivering today will still be there in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. And when you do a DCF, you get to a certain valuation multiple, depending on the cost of debt in that market. Where I have a bit of sometimes an issue is around when you start as a towerco to invest into the active part of the equipment. We all know that this is equipment that Huawei will want to sell, or whoever is the other vendor, a new generation every 6-7 years or so. And so there is a continued investment required. That's something I think we can cope with, but it's that's another aspect that differentiates the business model. In addition to the point I was making earlier on distribution, risk around location selection.
And I mean, maybe this is also a good time to move on to the challenges of the commercials. Yeah, jump in.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but before you move on to the next point, I wonder if I may just take 30 seconds to respond to what Emmanuel said, which makes perfect sense to me, Emmanuel. And part of the point is that we did some of the things that we did to be different, because we thought that these are things that the likes of Helios and the likes of Huawei would find very difficult, because somehow copying you, we didn't figure was a plan for success. We have to try something which is different. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yes, very much not wanting to offend anyone, but it is quite expensive, is RAN equipment, and replacing it every few years does add up to quite a lot of money. And that's one of the reasons why strategically we want to control that also.
Got it.
Sorry, I hope that's okay, Sally, you carry on.
No, perfect. So, I mean, following on to that, because we're talking about the cost effectiveness of the rural site developments and the new technologies, do you not also think, Emmanuel and Mike, I don't know how much you deal with regulators, but how much regulatory discussion there needs to be had to make this You know, and I mean, the MNOs would be having these discussions too, because there are sort of availability, you know, targets they have to meet with regulators, and there are coverage targets to meet. But I think there needs a bit more discussion around are there any concessions that are going to be given? And maybe we can chat about that as to if any of you have had, you know, some dealings with how the regulators are seeing expanding and getting to the ultra rural, and what potential concessions there could be. You know, I know there are a lot of strict rules around switching off sites and only having sites during certain hours, and a lot of that has been totally, you know, sort of refused by certain regulators, even in critical sort of areas that have quite high security risks. But it would be interesting to just chat a bit about, especially when we come to sort of Open RAN or RAN sharing and those kinds of technologies, what you think we should be discussed and how quickly we could get there in Africa, given that there's still a few years to get there in more mature and urban, sophisticated markets. And we're still sitting in Africa largely in rural 2G, 3G ecosystems. So who would like to go first? Emmanuel, maybe kick off with you?
I won't say much on that topic, but I would say it's a very good question. I would be quite curious to hear from Mike how you are addressing the regulatory points market by market, because I think it's a very you know, it's specific to each market, and each regulator will typically have its own views. Everyone, like across all the stakeholders who are interested in this, I think the regulators are one of very important one, and everyone is, you know, is looking to address that challenge and improve coverage, right? So it's, I think everyone is trying to help wherever they can, whether you're a DFI, you're a vendor, a capital provider, but I would be curious to hear directly from you, like more specifically what you've seen and what type of models and kind of approaches that you differentiate across the continent.
Yeah, thank you. So we do, as we all know, work in a highly regulated industry. It's part of the environment in which we have to operate. Again, one of the decisions that we made at the very beginning was we're not going to apply for mobile network operator licenses because that's too difficult and too expensive. Therefore, we need to work with somebody that's got one. And quite frankly, the reason we have to work with the likes of Orange and MTN is not for any other reason than they are licensed to offer these services. So we work in partnership with them. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we don't have to have a ton of licenses. And you're right, it's very country specific. And you know how African regulators work. The moment you think you've got everything under control, they will invent a new license, which if they think they can take some more money off you, right? So you have to be on top of it all of the time. It's one of the reasons that with our country managers, because we have our own self-contained full operation in every country in which we are active, with a CEO that we insist is a local national. So not only does he or she have to be African, we wouldn't put a Nigerian in Ghana, for example, because it has to, that understanding of the local environment and the regulatory requirements under which we operate. And sometimes you need investment licenses, infrastructure operator licenses are required. And you're right, it's different from market to market. So understanding that and getting the licenses that you need is just part of the job for us. There are some cases, there are some countries, I won't name them, where they are less liberated, where they have very punitive fees for some of these licenses, which is a significant barrier to entry. When a regulator wants to charge $1,000 a month for a VSAT license per site, and the site generates $500, but the $1,000 is fixed, you can see how that can be a problem. Fortunately, in this day, there are not too many countries, even across the whole of Africa, but there are one or two that still have that short-sighted view of we can make some money out of this. But I would say mostly our experience is positive. And yes, we fill out a lot of forms and we pay a lot of fees and so forth, but it is complicated, but it is something which you can navigate through.
And how do you handle the notion that you're effectively piggybacking on the spectrum license of a third party? Is it always very well defined in the regulatory framework, or is it a bit of a gray area most of the time?
Yes, no, I think it's that it's not something which we have had the occasional question, but I don't think that it's generally a problem that we are seen as an operator in disguise, I would say, because when a mobile network operator license is granted, mostly what you're granting is spectrum megahertz. So that goes to the MNO, and they have the numbers assigned by the regulator. So it's the operator's spectrum, it's their SIMs and numbers, it's their brand. Right? We are not a consumer brand. So no, I don't think that there is a big issue in that we are seen as an operator in disguise. We are very much delivering a service to the mobile operator such that they can deliver under their license, and we're like a subcontractor, really, no more than that. But still, you know the situation, because I think that many of the licenses that AMN needs are the same ones that Helios needs to get as well. So often now there are infrastructure operator licenses as distinct from mobile network operator licenses. And as I said already, and you said it yourself, every country is different. You need to understand what is the current regime and also be aware what's coming next, because the operator can have seen an opportunity to license some other part of the activity in the total food chain, which is delivering mobile network, and create a new license and, hey, fill out the form, pay your fee, get the license.
I mean, Gary, maybe you want to come in here now that we're sort of talking spectrum sharing and Open RAN sharing, as to what your experiences in where it's being tested, particularly obviously for the context of this discussion in Africa, and sort of how you see that evolving to get to the more rural communities.
Yeah, sure, Sally. So first of all, we are also looking into the solutions to adopt, the RAN sharing concept, whether it's possible to develop the rural in Africa. So in fact, the solution itself is already in industry for many, many years. So basically, I just give a very brief introduction to the mode of the RAN share concept. So maybe a couple of mainstream model would be, the first one would be on the domestic roaming, where the MNO themselves, they sign roaming contract and they roam to each other networks. And then based on that, the manage of the network is totally based on the host network, and also the billing will be more usually on a post-billing basis. They will do the settlement afterwards. So the beauty for this model is to have a very easy time to market solution, plug and play, first of all. The second model will be on the so-called the multi-operator radio access network, or the MO-RAN. So basically, this solution is based on the single RAN equipment, but multi-operators, they have dedicated spectrum. They can use their own spectrum resources to cover the same area based on the same equipment. So we see examples would be like in Thailand, the AIS and DTAC, they use this kind of model. So this kind of a MO-RAN model, usually it will be more suitable for operators. They have a different spectrum resources strategy. So for example, some operator A, they will have a better coverage or the low frequency band. They more focus on the 2G, for example. Whereas another operator, they also use the same equipment, but they have a more capacity layer. So they may try to deploy some 3G or even 4G data services. So that would be an ideal solution for that. The third would be called the multi-operator core network, or the MOCON. Okay, MOCON. I think this also deployed in many countries in Europe, and also in rural market in particular, like in Malaysia. This is an example that the government funded project. So the government wants to build a few hundred, rural sites. but with all the operators can share the to have the coverage. So based on that, this is a government-funded project, and because of that, the government consider that whether they use the Mo Conway or the Mo Ran way will be better. But eventually, the Malaysian government decided Mo Conway will be more suitable for them because they try to use the minimum spectrum to achieve the target. So I think this kind of solution will be another example. And finally, the fourth one will be the mix of the above. Would be interesting to see, actually the RAN shared concept already in Africa for quite some years. So like in South Africa, so what we observe is they go through a different phases basically. So before 2018, in South Africa, they may have 4 or 5 operators. Before 2018, all those operators, they tend to have their own strategy to partner with different their strategic carrier to sign the domestic roaming agreement. So that would be the first phases before 2018. And 2 years back, we see the things start changing. Operators start terminating the domestic roaming agreement. Instead, they move away from domestic roaming into a Mo Conway. So I think this is a kind of a differentiation on the surface is the initial phase. And nowadays, they will go into a third stage, which some operators, they may try to have a Mo Ran, to try to attempt some Mo Ran, which is fully utilize their own spectrum benefit to provide. Whereas some other operators, they will sign up a so-called bilateral MOCN, which means the two operators that they sign, they can roam to each other's network. So we think the cases in South Africa is just to show on 2 things mainly. One thing is the RAN share solution is already feasible, mature for quite some time. The second thing we see is the shared RAN strategy will changes over time. So I think that will be also, no matter for the upcoming telco or the MNO, they also need to consider will be also eventually it could be a mixture of solutions. So as far as the telco industry is concerned, I think I would like to draw a little bit of a recommendation whether the tower company can consider they use the neutral hosts to use the operator's RAN or they purchase their own RAN. Okay, so I think they can, based on a couple of things. First of all, is to consider the budget, of course, the rural project budget to discuss between the operators and the telcos. And based on the budget, they will decide whether it is more economy for the operator themselves to use the RAN or the telco company to do it. The second is to consider the local maintenance and operate network capability, because we know the rural market is very complex in practice. So we also know different operators and different telco companies, they will have different strengths in different regions. So I think that would be also a very important consideration to consider the capability. The third one, whether it is for the telco company especially, whether they can think about to expand their business further. So let's say after they build the RAN in the rural market, they may consider to build some other new services based on that, especially to cope with the government's plan. Maybe the government want to provide some education service, or medical services, that kind of services. The telco company can also consider if that strategy fit into their portfolio. And finally, I think we can discuss more in the next section. It's about whether the policy impact to telco company, whether the telco company are allowed to do so or not.
Thanks, Gary. I mean, I think it all gets back to sort of regulators and sort of how we all going to collaborate into moving forward to something that works for everyone. I think it's time now to give some questions. Matthew, any questions?
Yeah, I can read some out for the panel. So I think, and this is Matt Edwards again. Hello, everyone. Besides co-location with other MNOs, what other customers or industries could be envisioned in rural Africa to optimize an installation? So I think this is down to sort of non-MNO investment that might help make these sites viable. Perhaps one will go to Emmanuel first.
Okay. I mean, typically 99% of TowerCo's revenue is coming from MNOs. You have a few ISPs potentially, but I'm not sure they would be primarily attracted in these areas. What I'm thinking is maybe looking at the FMCG segments, because if a company like AMN looks at building this distribution capability, then it can become attractive to anyone who is looking to distribute a product in these areas, or either them distributing the product through this channel or partnering with them potentially. So I mean, I will leave Mike to give his views on that. Is probably better solution.
Yeah, it's a good question, and we have looked at exploring certain other synergies. I mean, also on the retail side as well. I won't go into that in a lot of detail, but it was something that we did try but did not pursue. Again, all of our revenue comes from the MNOs. We do have multiple streams in the sense that whilst our core business is in providing a service and taking a share of the revenue, I mentioned the retail distribution, so we also take commissions. Normally we formally act as a mobile money super agent and a master airtime distributor. So we make commissions 1 or 2% on airtime sales and a few % on every transaction of mobile money, which we call non-core revenue, but it still comes from the MNO. So far, whilst we have explored, right now we are not actively pursuing any other, let's say, value-added type services on the back of the towers that we are building. It's certainly there is potential, we see that, of course, but for the moment we remain quite focused on delivering on the core business.
Thank you. And there's actually quite a few more questions specifically for Mike, so I'll dive into that. I think you've piqued people's curiosity. Someone was asking about the break-even point on a typical rural site. Would you be able to share that?
Sorry, Matt, just repeat that, please. It faded a bit.
What's the break-even point for a typical rural site?
Oh, well, depending upon whether or not you include CapEx, amortization, and so forth, I'd say less than $1,000. I don't want to be too specific on that one.
Okay, very good. And one last question, I think, before we run out of time, is someone asking about licensing this business model in other geographies where you do not operate. Is this going to be just your own, or would you expand into other geographies in the licensing?
Well, it's another good question. We certainly we're very focused on Africa, and we believe that we have a lot more work to do yet to get to the point where we think that we've got Africa well covered. I do believe that the technology will be very applicable to other emerging markets, and specifically Southeast Asia, Latin America, and other places as well, India, I think. So we have had discussions, but have not come to anything on how we might franchise or license our model, because of course, we've got 7 years of learning and 7 years of pain and 7 years of trial and error and mistakes, which don't have to be replicated by somebody else. So we can package up what we do. And then on a kind of license basis, we could transfer all of that know-how. So the same technical designs, the same tools to operate the network, everything, so that you can be an AMN lookalike and do that under a license. We have not implemented that with anyone yet, but we have had various discussions which so far have not come to anything.
Okay, I think we're going to need to draw a line under it there. So I think I'll take this opportunity just to flip on my camera and say thank you to everyone for taking part in this panel. Thank you, Sally, Emmanuel, Gary, and Mike. Been really, really interesting, really, really fascinating, and I think a sign of things to come. But we are about to be booted off the platform. So thank you very much for watching. The platform will remain open for networking for days, but especially this evening. So please do jump on and say hello. Thank you.